You have a new book just came out, Sitting Ringside Volume 1, WCW is the subtitle. You had a podcast called Sitting Ringside for several years. So what sort of made you want to write a book and catalog it in this way versus having the podcast as your forum for many years?
That's a great question. Nobody's asked me that in this whole media tour thing. Um, so the answer to the question, the last question is, or the first question, maybe, I don't know,
Hmm.
is I didn't want to write a book. I never intended to write a book.
Hmm.
Um, I happened to be looking through my desk, cleaning it out about 18 months ago, and saw a file folder with all these old WCW rare, never before seen formats. Sort of
Hmm.
it's fun to see because it's sort of the evolution of the format from a one pager where you fill in the enhancement guys' names, to the last Nitro format where you have all these production notes and notes on what Vince McMahon's going to do and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of fun to look at. But I didn't really know what to do with them, but I knew they were rare. I knew people would want to see them, or get them autographed or whatever. So I took a picture of one of the 1995 WCW Saturday Night formats, the front page, and I said, anybody be interested in this? And obviously a lot of people reacted, and I was asking, what do you think it's worth? I got like 200 pages of these, blah blah blah. And Guy Evans, who did the Nitro book, reached out to me and said, I think we should do a scrapbook.
Hmm.
And I said, that's great. He goes, yeah, you could tell some stories about the guys and we could do a scrapbook, almost like Cornette's old scrapbook that he put out,
Hmm.
um, which was is extremely entertaining. I know he doesn't sell it anymore, which is a shame because it's a must have.
Hmm.
And I can't find mine, but it's somewhere here. When I move soon, I'll be able to find it.
Hmm.
But so anyway, so we agreed to do that, and then I started, talking to him. He was taping our phone conversations, just asking me things. And like 3 months later, he's like, "Oh, we're going to write an autobiography, and we're also going to have the bonus material." And
Hmm.
I'm like, "Really?" He goes, "You don't understand, but to me at least," he said, "your story is fascinating. All the hurdles you had to overcome, and then once you finally got them, your take on somebody who quote unquote was sitting ringside for wrestling history." And I said, I told him, okay, it's a good thing you're a good writer. So,
Hmm.
and it was. Um, how we came up with the title, uh, we threw a bunch of stuff around. I wanted to call it Stooge of the Year. There's a whole chapter on me being, Stooge of the Year, when I first got into WCW. Um, uh, he came up with, he said, how about just sitting ringside? And I said that's perfect. A, and B, the logo, we I had like 60,000, 70,000 subscribers at its peak of the
Hmm.
podcast. So the logo uh was, I don't want to say recognizable, but more recognizable than anything else that you could put on there, probably.
Hmm.
Um, unless it's a picture of Hulk Hogan and there's no context in that. So we decided to do it. And as far as me not having the podcast, I moved to adfreeshows.com, and dumb me, I didn't know uh what is it? It's our ESS feed. Is that what it's called?
RSS, yeah.
RSS feed
Hmm.
was, and I didn't realize that the people that I just finished the contract with had the rights to keep it. And
Okay.
Conrad went back and forth and tried to negotiate that, and they wouldn't give it up. And we tried to do like a free podcast behind a wall, a paywall, and even I couldn't, if you held the gun to my head, figure out how to bring it up.
Hmm.
So it just got, I mean, it just, we lost all our subscribers, and it just lost the momentum from there. If I'm being honest, it was getting harder. Companies were protecting their talent more. Most of the companies you had to have a PR guy on, if you wanted to interview anybody. So, or a list of questions first. And I was just, it kind of wasn't fun anymore.
Hmm.
But Conrad owns the archive, so I know there's some up. I don't know. I've suggested to him, like, when certain things happen, when, like, I had Terry Funk on for like 90 minutes, and I suggested, when he passed, you might want to plug that, and they
Mhm.
didn't, and that's, he bought it, so that's his prerogative. And not saying anything bad about Conrad. He's a brilliant businessman. He's just extremely busy, so he just probably doesn't have the time
Mhm.
to deal with stuff like that. But that's why I don't have the podcast, and I hope that answers your question without uh me going on a rant, which I tend to do sometimes.
Pot meat kettle. So I'm looking forward to digging into the book because I've seen some more and more comments about it over the past couple weeks. I know you've actually done some of the formats you're autographing and like sending bundling as part of like a package. You get the book and some formats. So I thought that was really cool. But this was actually good timing because I listened to an interview with Eric Bischoff recently, and I didn't realize it at the time, but it was the person that conducted the interview. He uploaded like an archive, but I started listening thinking it was new, and it was actually when Eric was promoting his book, and he started talking about how Guy found a different perspective to take to tell a new story because Eric brought up the point like people are going to want to talk about finger poke of doom and the negative stuff of WCW, and he's like tired of it, and understandably Guy kind of pitched it as a different perspective. Is that something that sold you on working with Guy? Because you said you thought you were doing like a scrapbook, and then it was, hey, no, we're going to write a story. Was it the way he sold it to you that sort of made you think,
Well,
okay,
it,
this
it
is
didn't start. Sorry, didn't mean to
no,
interrupt.
no, 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 go
Um,
ahead.
it didn't start out that way. It's something that he came upon after talking to me and hearing part of my story and doing research about my story,
Mhm.
and hearing my perspective. Uh, I was, he had me at hello. I had all these formats, and I had no way how to get them out and no way how to monetize them, and I wanted to. So he had me at hello. I had talked to him and got to know him a little bit uh when he interviewed me a couple times for the Nitro book.
Mhm.
Uh but what I found out, and I don't want to give him a big head, but what I find out is he's quite brilliant at what he
Mhm.
does. Very there's a lot of great wrestling writers out there, deep respect, but I don't know that there's anybody who tells a story of somebody else's life like he does. There were times he would start to tell a story, because I got the after we got done with this and all, I got the book in chapters
Mhm.
emailed to me. So like he would start to tell a story, and in chapter 2, and I'd email it because he always wanted to know if there's anything that I wanted to change.
Mhm.
And so I would email him back and say, well, yeah, you didn't finish the story. He goes, well, we finished the story in chapter 4. Then I would read chapter 4, and it all made sense. So he's quite brilliant that way. And
Mhm.
it was funny. I looked at my wife like after a few chapters, because he sent them to me like every night or every other night. He would
Mhm.
send me a chapter. So I looked at my wife and I said, this is my story, and I'm anxious to see what comes next. That's how good it is.
Yeah.
So I give him, it is my story, but I give him a ton of credit for creating it the way that he has, and so I think people will enjoy reading it. I
Mhm.
never would have thought that about an autobiography, which is why I didn't want to do one.
Mhm.
And for those who don't think that they want to read it, you can buy it for the formats.
There you go. There's another bonus. I know it's available on Amazon. One of the other websites is Guy Evans Books, plural, David Penzer book. All right, there we go. I want you've uh obviously seen a lot over the years. Probably have tons of WCW stories in the book. Anything maybe because of the format that didn't get included in this one that uh volume 1 suggests that there's going to be another book, but is there another place for some of the WCW stories that maybe didn't get included? Like, have you thought about maybe releasing excerpts or, maybe trying to find a new home for it?
I don't know. That's really Guy's job,
Mhm.
as the book. Um, but and I'll certainly, it's not a bad idea to talk to him about it. but I think it's pretty thorough. I think we covered pretty much everything. There was one story after we got released that not really a story, but a fun little item that, back when I first started, and I talked about this in the book, that referee Pee Wee Anderson offered to, ride with me and teach me the road. And we later became really good friends, and our family's friends. But I realized later on that, I was getting my car paid for, my gas paid for, my hotel paid for. And so he was using me, and I was using him to learn the road. And often if he saw somebody that he thought was, going to be a star potentially, or was a nice guy, who, because they just got signed to the company, didn't necessarily have the money to pay their own hotel room, he would suggest that we let them stay on a rollaway. There was one guy who for about 3 months rode with us and stayed with us, called Terror Rising. And I don't know if you know
Whatever happened
where
to
that
him?
went, but there's a whole now era named after him. So I forgot that part. I don't know how interesting that is. I just, I was watching WrestleMania, and he came out, and I said, darn, I forgot to tell that story. So I don't think anybody's going to miss it, but that's the answer.
Hey, they read the book, and then maybe if they want more, maybe, you talk to Guy and say, hey, maybe a little bit more. But I know you are pretty good friends with Chris Jericho. You were part of a storyline, or I guess he introduced you, even though people saw you on TV. He got mad at you for announcing the winner of the matches. He, kind of took your chair one time. And for those that don't know it, you're also a realtor in the Tampa area. And I think you said he's one of your clients. So I wanted to see if you had any good realtor stories that you wanted to share.
Not really.
No,
I mean,
no.
it's not. There's no good realtor stories. You close, you get paid, and you fight. You go back into the Shark Tank for another round of. I thought the wrestling business was tough. Man, real estate business is nothing compared to the wrestling business. I mean, the wrestling business is nothing compared to the real estate business. But no, I actually sold his old house, not the one he lives in now. But I sold his old house for him. But yeah, we remain friends. He lives down about 10 miles away from me. And uh people talk about the greatest of all times. First of all, that was all Chris's idea. It was 100% Chris's idea. I might have thrown in something. He probably told me I don't like it, and I'd shut my mouth again. Just riding down the road. But Terry Taylor got it approved, and we ran with it. But the funny thing that always cracks me up, and no, people like to talk about the greatest of all time, and I don't know if that's an argument I want to get into, but I do think that Chris Jericho is the greatest of all time in the wrestling business of reinventing himself successfully. I can't think of another person who's come close to doing it, how many times he's done it. And always drawing money, and always, selling merchandise and all that. So, but this was like one of his first ones. And the thing that always cracked me up is, he would rip off my tux jacket, then he'd take my chair, like you said, and hit it against the ring post. So the next week he'd come out, bring out a new tux jacket and apologize, which made sense. But then he'd bring me a chair. And it's like, I'm in a building with 5,000 chairs. Why do you need to bring me a chair? And it's little things like that. I liken it to when he snapped the pen before he said, you just made the list. I mean, he made the snapping of a pen get a pop, a huge pop. It's little things like that most people don't think of, that makes him brilliant. And yeah, he's actually reading the book, and hopefully we'll get it when he's done. We'll get on Talk is Jericho and discuss it. I'm curious to see what he thinks, because there is a lot about him in there. Curious what Eric Bischoff thinks. That one has me a little nervous. But yeah, Chris, that was all Chris. And it helped me, it helped me. And a lot of the thing people don't realize, that most of the stuff that Chris does is helping other people get over. No, I know the list thing got Kevin Owens over to I'm not saying he wasn't over before. He did the stuff with his group, which got uh, Sammy Guevara over, and those guys. So yeah, so most of the stuff he does is with the intent to get people over. I don't know where they're going with this new character, but
Mhm.
but I see that they put him with Big Bill, who's a great guy actually.
Mhm.
So hopefully they'll be able to do something with that. I haven't watched the last couple of weeks of AEW. I've been doing mostly at night. I've been doing mostly interviews. So
Mhm.
um but yeah, Chris is great, and look forward to seeing how what he thinks of the book.
Here's one thing I picked up on. You were just talking about nuance and the finer details. I think it was 2 weeks ago, he switched from the long pants to the trunks, and immediately the first thing I thought of was he did the same thing in 2008 when he switched from like the Y2J stuff to he started wearing suits outside of the ring. And back then he said No Country for Old Men was one of the movies that inspired him. And seeing that, I was just like, all right, like here, he's not coming out saying like, I'm a bad guy, like I'm gonna beat up the good guys and I'm gonna take your belt and anything. But just the nuance, the little subtle things that he does, it's really, you kind of pay attention to it over time, and he is really good at getting people over. And I think people want to take a side of what they like or dislike what Jericho's doing, but I think overall it's going to get Big Bill over, and it's going to get other people over in the long run. I think
And that's the
that's
point. And he wanted to get
yeah.
Orange Cassidy over, and he wanted to get Sammy Guevara over, and there's so many guys, that he
Mhm.
unfortunately he did the thing with geez, I forget his name, the guy who beat him on his debut. Uh
Action Andretti.
that's Andretti.
Hmm.
And man, I was watching that and I'm going, and not for a minute in my mind, because I was actually watching that live. Not for a minute in my mind did I think that Jericho wasn't going over at the end. There's
Hmm.
not as much as I've been around the business. I'm watching it. I'm going, man, it looks like they might, but eventually Chris will go over. He'll find a way. They'll find a way. And when he got pinned, I was like, I was as shocked as I've been in anything in the wrestling business, quite frankly.
Hmm.
Uh, and it was his idea, and unfortunately they didn't really take advantage of Action Andretti. He's still there, kind of treading, and but that's what he wants to do,
Hmm.
so and I know that, because I'm friends with him. I've been friends with him for 25, 28 years.
Hmm.
um so, and I will say this, the other person who's really good at nuance and stuff like that, obviously he just went into the Hall of Fame, is Paul Heyman. But Paul does it for other people. Chris does it with himself to hope other people get over.
Hmm.
So it's very, if I don't want to not give Paul his due, but it's different because Chris is
Hmm.
coming up with, it's easy to get different guys over when they're different people, when they're different wrestlers. I'll get this guy over using this gimmick. I'll get this guy over using this gimmick. Roman Reigns is going to be the head of the table. Chris is reinventing himself every time.
Hmm.
So that to me is way more difficult.
I have one more question for you, but I did come prepared. I have my own realtor story. I lived in Florida for a little bit, and we were looking at houses, and we go into it was like, I don't know, Castleberry, or like outside Orlando. That's where we were looking. We go into the house, and one of the walls was like, it looked like a horror movie. Like it was splattered like red paint everywhere. It probably could have said Red Rum, and it would have, you know, just set the mood. But then there's a squatter in the house, and I swear the realtor with us was in front of us. Her feet were moving like in a cartoon, like going like this, but she's not moving. She's like, okay, get out of the house, get out of the house. And I was like, oh, like I don't want this house anymore.
Yeah, I've never encountered a squatter, thank
So
God. That's something
yeah, hopefully you never do.
One of the fun things about being a realtor for me is you never know what you're walking into. You can see pictures and all that, but
Hmm.
you never know what you're going to walk into. And that part is always cool. That's almost like the reveal.
Hmm.
Like if I'll compare it like in wrestling. If they tease a storyline and then you get the reveal. It's
Hmm.
not apples to apples, but it's similar. Every time you walk in a house, you get the reveal, and
Hmm.
sometimes you could tell immediately. Like if it's been on the market a long time and they've lowered it a bunch of times, most of the time I could tell immediately what's wrong with it, and
Hmm.
why it didn't sell.
Yeah.
So that's always fun. But yeah, it's a Shark Tank, brother. It's everybody's fighting for their life and not always honestly. And
Hmm.
the other day I said to my wife, I said, maybe I'm too honest for this stuff. And I said, but I can't be any other way. I've lived my entire life with the karma thing, thinking you do
Hmm.
right by other people, then the karma will do right by you. The world will do right by you.
Hmm.
But there was so many things that recently, especially since it's gotten slow and interest rates went up, that man, people are just lying. They're just lying.
Hmm.
There was a pastor from a church who dabbles in real estate who lied. I found out he lied. Uh, Pastor from a church. Uh,
Of all
so I
people.
mean, it's I enjoy it, and
Hmm.
it's picking up for me. Luckily, it was kind of hard when I was doing the impact and I was gone every third weekend. It probably wasn't the smartest way to be a realtor, is not be around on the weekends. But
Hmm.
and so I kind of my business kind of went downhill. But since it was actually a blessing in disguise to leave impact, because it
Hmm.
really made me focus on working my butt off and regrowing my business. And knock on wood, it seems to be turning out right. So that's good. It's less stress when you have some closings and stuff than when you're sitting there trying to figure, cold calling people, trying to
Hmm.
figure out how to how to put somebody under contract, or even just show them a house,
Yeah. Uh,
or
my,
get
my,
them to answer the phone.
there you go. Nobody wants to answer the phone anymore.
No,
But that,
we get leads, and there's like leads like from a year ago, and I wish that people would just, because they reach out to us, we don't reach out to them. I mean, I
mm,
say cold call, I never really cold call, but like from a phone book, but they reach out to us, and the brokerage buys leads. So, I'd rather them just, is this a PG program or a rated R program?
mine, you could say
Yeah.
whatever you want.
I'd rather them just pick up the phone and tell me to fuck off. And at least I knew where I stood. I'd mark them as closed because they're not interested anymore.
Hmm.
And I try to even, like, text people that it's like, if you could just let me know where you stand, I won't bother you as much. And they,
Yeah.
they still won't. So it's just extremely frustrating. I would, you're not going to hurt. By the way, if you're a client of mine, and you happen to be a wrestling fan and you're listening to WrestleZone, uh, uh, if I call you, just, you're not going to hurt my feelings if you tell me to fuck off. You're clarifying where you're at in your real estate search, and I won't bother you anymore. So this took a weird direction, huh?
Hey, it actually segues nicely. My last question was going to be about your impact departure. I thought it was really nice, the way that they handled things. I know Scott announced it at the taping, and I was just going to ask, you maybe answered part of it already, but I was going to ask what contributed to the decision to leave. Was it what you have going on in Florida? If I don't know if you wanted to talk about any of it,
Yeah,
but I
I'm an
just I
open
just
book.
thought it was a nice, I thought it was a nice way to do things.
It wasn't my decision. About 6 months before, probably midsummer, Scott came to me and said, before we talk about it in the production meeting, well, first he called me over, and he hardly, even though I've known him for 30 years and we're friends, he hardly ever waves his finger like, come over here. So I was like, here we go.
Hmm.
And he goes, no, nothing to worry about. He goes, but I do want to tell you um, before we talked about in the production meeting that Jen Alexander, Jade Chung, is going to do the before the Impact matches, the two, kind of uh, pre-show matches we do, so to speak,
Hmm.
and at every taping. And I said, okay. And I'm like, hey, I thought maybe that was it for me. He goes, well, we can't, you can't do this forever. Uh, and I said, well, I understand that. He said, well, there might be a time coming up here that it might come to an end for now. And I said, could you give me an estimation of, because I don't want to have to worry about it. He goes,
Hmm.
you're good through at least the end of the year. What I didn't know that he knew and he couldn't tell me is he was bringing TNA back and he wanted a new look.
Yeah.
So, which made a lot of sense. But he made it clear that I was passing the mic to Jen. And so I took that as a great deal of a source of pride. Um, Gary Capetta passed the mic to me. I wanted to take it as help her out as much as I can. She's really a natural at doing it. So there wasn't all that much, but a lot of the, what they tell you from the truck and, stuff like that is what she was more concerned about. She already knew how to talk on a microphone.
Hmm.
So I knew that. Then they brought me up to Toronto for that Final Resolution show. And I'm thinking to myself, who does this? My replacement is there.
Hmm.
I mean, who flies you up to a one-off show, a pay-per-view from Florida, pays you, put you up in a hotel room? I just thought that was incredibly classy of
Hmm.
Scott to do. And then what was supposed to happen at the end of the show was, because this was the last Impact show, they were gonna continue at Hard to Kill in January with TNA.
Hmm.
And what was said on the format was the Impact talent comes out and says goodbye to Impact, sort of
Hmm.
ceremonial goodbye to Impact. What I had no freaking clue and was absolutely still blown away by is that Scott had arranged for all them to all come out and say goodbye to me. He gave me
Hmm.
a plaque. I put it up online just recently. I had a problem doing it, so I had a third party go ahead and do it, and I put it up online recently. You can find it on Twitter, but uh, especially if you follow my account at David Penzer. But yeah, gave me a beautiful plaque and really put me over, and the crowd and the talent was chanting, "Thank you, Penzer," and that means so much to me. It didn't have to be done.
Hmm.
They're a small company. They could have used that money somewhere else, but they did it for me, and that really means a lot. And that's the way that company is. It's a family. I mean, it's more of a family. Wrestling is a family, but that company is more of a family. It's not just the talent, it's management and it's production and it's the talent that all, root for each other and are excited for each other. I mean, when Lish just won her first title in Impact, in TNA Impact, I can't even imagine what the celebration was in the locker room backstage. People honestly were happy for her,
Yeah.
legitimately. It wasn't about, oh, I had to, they changed the belts, or Jody Threat and the other girl going, oh, this sucks. People were legitimately happy that she got her chance because she's been there forever. She's like the heart of the company almost.
Hmm.
She's like the mama bear of the company. Her and Gail Kim, and so I was happy for her. I said something, I sent an email to Eddie because I didn't have her number, and just told her how excited I was, and to say congratulations, and he wrote back, that means a lot coming from you. So that's the way it is there. And I can't speak to AEW or WWE or NWA. I could speak to what I witnessed in Impact, and that send off was special and always mean a lot to me.
Hmm.
And uh, unfortunately, Scott didn't last much longer. I don't have the details of what happened. Obviously, he butted heads with the guy who owns the company, which is never a good idea. Um, but that was really a shame, because he ate and he slept and he hardly ever slept. TNA Impact
Hmm.
Wrestling, and it meant a lot to him. And uh, so that was really unfortunate. But things happen, I guess. I don't want to
Yeah.
trivialize it, but you have to move on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
I'm sure he's moving. I'm sure he has plans to move on at some point too. So I mean, you kind of, it's kind of like you mourn it for a little while, and then you got to kind of go move forward. So
yeah.
certainly I did, and then
Hmm.
I reached out to some of the guys a couple months later. How's it going without Scott? And they were like, you know what, it's different, but it's not as bad as we thought, because uh because we really don't have a choice. We're under contract. So, and I was like, well, that's good. I'm glad. I'm not glad for
Yeah.
Scott, but I'm glad for the company that they're, uh, that it's going okay. So
Yeah. And I
they'll
think
always have a special place in my heart.
I think you hear a lot of the talent talk about the family aspect, so I think that still carries over. But
What I will say though is I don't know how many more people are going to be leaving money on the table to stay there. That's, you lose that when you lose a guy like Scott.
mhm,
People leaving money on the table potentially to be somewhere where they're confident that Scott's going to guide them and make and do them right. You know what I mean? Where
mhm,
they're might be going for a little bit more money into an unknown. So, unfortunately, that's going to go away. I'm sure they knew that. I don't know what the extent of that was. I know that it happened more frequently than unfrequently, but I certainly, I don't know if, I don't know, I have a dollar sign or anywhere close to
mhm.
one, but they're going to lose that, and they had to know that, and so it's a shame. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see where it goes, but I appreciate you sharing, more of the details about your celebration. I said it was a really nice thing for them to do. So, maybe volume two when it comes out, that'll be the TNA years. So I don't know
Volume
what.
two is going to be a lot. Volume two is going to be a lot of XWF and XWF related material. We're finally going to tell the story of the XWF because I was an integral part of basically all of it once I got there, um, and from the beginning to the end. Not the very beginning when they formed, but from the beginning of
Mhm,
planning to do television tapings. And we have all kinds of old business plans and formats for bonus material. And we're going to talk TNA and Impact Wrestling. We'll talk me on a tour bus with Roddy Piper for 45 days, crisscrossing the country doing his book tour. So, and then I'm sure we'll end with what we just talked about.
yeah.
The farewell. And if that's the way it ends, my story and my adventure, my book and my adventure, you know what? I have no
Mhm,
regrets. I'm blessed. I did this 30 years. I got to live my dream. It was so improbable for it to happen, but it did. And anybody that was along for the ride, man, I just appreciate you being there for me.
mhm. You have the right mindset, positive outlook. You can get the book at guyevansbooks.com or davidpenzerbook.com. Anything else you want to plug or promote before we close this out?
Oh, if you don't follow me on Twitter, we don't talk politics, we don't yell and scream. I've never blocked anybody. Well, that's that. I take that back. I did block Chris Cruz because he's lost his ever loving mind. But but uh, you know, we just talk about I would talk about wrestling. Sometimes I don't say anything for a couple days, and then sometimes I'll see something like an angle or something, and I'll
Mhm.
what do you think about this? This is what I think about this, and a little fantasy football on the side during the football season. But uh, but yeah, Chris Cruz, I could write a book about him. Um, but yeah,
Don't.
at davidpenzer.com. And if you'd like to join me, I'd love to have you.